Hey, Scott Simbucci here, and it's time for installment number 3 of Startups Are Ultramarathons. So it's appropriate that I would do installment number 3 because I'm less than 3 days away from the starting line. So the time I'm recording this or presenting this here on LinkedIn Live, it's Wednesday afternoon. So if things are going well, 3 days from now, 72 hours from now, I'll be somewhere heading down out of the high country after about 30 miles, heading into what they call the canyon. So if you missed the first couple of installments, installment 1, installment 2, part 1, part 2, what I've been doing is sharing some lessons from the trail. So as I've been training for my next ultramarathon, which is in less than 72 hours, it's the Western States 100. It's one of the most prestigious and the oldest ultramarathons out there in the world. And so I've been training. I tell people I've been training since January 4th, but really I've been training for this race for probably the last 7 years. Just one, to get into the race, and 2, to get myself mentally ready. And of course, the last 6 months has been really just about tuning up and getting ready for this event coming up. So what I've been doing is in these lessons from the trail, just sharing a couple of lessons that I've learned and discovered over the course of the last months and years in the work that I do in this training and doing these races, and relating those back to ultramarathons, or relating this back to startups, because really when you think about running your startup, as much as we work in sprints and you're always pushing and you're always trying to get to the next release or the next sale or the next funding or the next hire, everything feels like push, push, push. The long view of where you want to go from idea to impact is to really think about this as an ultramarathon. And so the one thing that I would say is that, at least with my races, there's a finishing line at some point. You just, however many miles you cover, 100 miles, 200 miles, at least at some point there's a finish line. For running a startup, sometimes it doesn't ever feel like there is a finish line. There's always that next big checkpoint you get to that you think is like, oh, now we're done, is really just the starting line for the next part of your race. So I'll try to keep this to about 20 or 30 minutes, share a couple of lessons. If you missed the first 2 parts, definitely go back and check those out. We covered 2 lessons in each of those. So I've covered 4 lessons so far in the first 2 parts. I'll probably do 2 more today just to get these documented and shared. And not sure if I'll get a chance to do a couple more before the race in the next couple of days, but if not, I'll definitely pick up afterwards. So do make sure you go listen to those first 2 if you haven't already. But if you haven't, that's totally fine, because these aren't necessarily built to build onto each other. You can treat these as modular if you like. So let's dig in. Let's do this. And by the way, if you're running a startup and you start thinking through, as you're listening, some of the lessons here, and you think about your sales and your growth and your idea to impact journey, if you feel like you want some help, then that could be something that the team and I here at Sales Quality can help you out with. So if you're keen to just have a quick chat, learn a little bit more, so we can learn more about your situation, brainstorm some ideas, figure out if or how we can help you out, then by all means, just shoot me an email, scott@salesqualia, QUALIA.com, salesqualia.com. You can also just DM me if you're watching this or listening to this on LinkedIn, or just leave a comment down below, just with the word opportunity, and we'll set up a time to have a chat. So, all right, so let's dig in. So lesson number 1 today, which I think would be 5 overall, and this is a lesson that I did a video about this actually a couple years ago when I was training for another race, and it's a shorter kind of 3 or 4 minute video, so I wanted to include it here because it's very relevant to the training that I've been doing this time around, and just my life when I think about not just running the business, but also balancing being a dad, balancing being a husband, doing all the things I want to do outside of work and do those things well. I think it's just an important lesson that I want to share. And that lesson is, what I wrote down is no wasted miles. No wasted miles. So what does that mean? Well, it means that every workout that I do throughout the course of the week has a purpose. There's no wasted miles. I'm not just like running for the sake of running. So there's some of the runs that I do are going to be long trail runs. I do those, as I mentioned in the past, a couple times a week, and certainly on Saturdays doing very long trail runs, anywhere from 15 miles up to as long as 50 miles. And those long trail runs obviously have a purpose because they're designed to help me get out on the terrain, test my nutrition, test my fitness on the real environment in which I'm going to be racing, the climbing up and how do my legs feel and how fast can I go on the downhill without overshooting and burning myself out. How do I pace myself over the course of a longer trail run? So those miles, of course, have a specific purpose. Even the shorter runs that I'm doing throughout the course of the week, my coach will oftentimes have on the calendar what he calls an easy recovery run of about an hour. So it's about a 7-mile run. And sometimes I'll do those early in the morning. Sometimes I'll do those later in the afternoon. And those are designed to literally recover from longer runs, but also add some miles. So it's lower miles, slower pace, and that's just designed to make sure that you're building up some endurance while not cooking yourself. You can't do a 15, 20, 30 mile trail run every single day, right? You have to have some time to rest and recover. So even those recovery runs have a purpose, because now you're doing so on tired legs, because maybe the day before or a couple days before you did a long trail run, and that's just designed to keep your heart rate in check, teach your body to be fat burning, so your metabolic rate is not so high, your heart rate's not so high. It's a nice slow pace, teaches your body to burn fat as opposed to the quick burning carbohydrates. So those are examples of no wasted miles. That also means, the metaphor of no wasted miles also means no wasted workouts. So, there's some days where I'm doing 2-a-days, meaning I might do a run in the morning and then in the afternoon I'm doing some weightlifting or strength training. Or I'll do some weightlifting and strength training on a Sunday morning and then that afternoon do a short run. Well, those workouts, those strength trainings, sometimes those are really short. They could be 20 or 30 minutes, and they're just body weight exercises in some cases. They're air squats and lunges and push-ups and pull-ups and high knee step back lunges and runner's arabesque. These are all just different exercises that my coach has you do without any heavy weights. Again, they're designed to help with flexibility, they're designed to help with mobility and strength, and targeting really specific muscle groups like my glutes for the step back lunges and the high knee holds. Upper body strength with the push-ups, actually doing push-ups in a certain way so that your elbows are close to your body, so it simulates kind of as you're running and hiking, your arms are moving back and forth. And you need those arms as you're especially moving uphill in order to get some momentum. Use your upper body to help pull along the lower body. So those have a specific purpose. And then there's other workouts where I'm doing that are heavy weights. I'm doing deadlifts and strict presses and back squats and front squats. And those are designed to really toughen up my muscles, give me pure, unadulterated power and strength. They also help strengthen my tendons, my ligaments, so that the pounding, that you're feeling over hundreds of thousands of steps. If you think about, roughly 6 miles, 7 miles is about 10,000 steps. You might have heard that from someone in terms of fitness, get your 10,000 steps in. That's about 6 miles. So if you translate that over 100 miles, right, that's hundreds of thousands of steps. So when you're doing that, especially around terrain that's downhill, so your body's really taking a beating when you're going downhill. When you're uphill, you're really pulling yourself up on top of rocks and roots and really hiking hard. You got to have strong ligaments and tendons. So those are all designed, again, to have a specific outcome in mind. Right? I'm not just running for the sake of running. So every workout matters. And it's even more important when I think about how to schedule my time, which is something I've talked about in one of the previous installments, which is look, if I'm going to be out there for 4 hours or 5 hours, I want to make the most out of that time. Sometimes it's not about just pure distance. Sometimes it's about what can I get out of that time that I'm out there running. So another running workout that I do is some speed work. So it's a 7-mile run. And within those 7-mile run, I'm doing 30 seconds fast and 30 seconds slow, with 30 seconds fast, 30 seconds slow, or sometimes 60 minutes fast, 60 seconds fast, 60 seconds slow. That's designed to get your foot speed up a little bit, to build up some ATP in your muscles to help to affect your ability to run a little bit faster when you would need to run faster on some of the downhills and the flats out there. So again, they all have a purpose, because I want to make the most out of the time that I have, because every minute that I'm away doing training, that means I'm not home. I'm not helping my wife with my son. I'm not spending time with them. And even the workouts that I'm doing, oftentimes, as I've talked about in a previous installment, I'm getting up at 4 in the morning or even 3:45 in the morning to get those done, get back home, so that I can still participate in the daily routine that needs to happen every single day. So I don't want to waste any time. I don't want to waste any movements. I don't want to waste and emotion doing workouts that just don't matter. So what does that mean for startups? What does that mean for sales? Well, I think a couple things is, like, a lot of times, especially as an early stage startup, oftentimes one of the mistakes I see is founders and founding teams, they really focus too much on marketing and not enough on selling. So the idea is like, well, we've got to like build the brand, and we got to do ads, and we've got to do SEO, and we've got to figure out a way to get some organic and inbound leads. And all of those things are important, but at the end of the day, if you're an early stage startup, like that could be a lot of wasted miles, because if you're still early enough, you're trying to figure out product market fit, how can you possibly market if you don't even know what message and which market you're marketing to? And even if you bring in leads with your marketing, they might be the wrong leads because they're wrong fit people. They don't really match what is going to be your future ideal customer profile, your future ICP, right? So one of the mantras we talk about with our clients all the time is sell first, market later. Figure out how to sell your stuff. Figure out who your target market is. Figure out who the buyers are within those target customers. Figure out what all the processes, why are they going to buy? What's the ROI they're going to see? What are the problems that they have? What are the priorities of those key managers that you're selling to? And how do you implement with those people? You got to figure out all of those things, and that's going to help you identify exactly what the message should be so that you can use that messaging in your marketing later on. So the wasted miles I see too often are miles of founders' time and effort and money spent on SEO and marketing and branding and going to conferences without a really clear sales strategy. Another example of avoiding the wasted miles is in your sales calls and in your sales opportunities themselves. There's this idea of continuations versus advances. Continuations versus advances. So this is a concept that I learned in Major Account Sales Strategy. It's a book by Neil Rackham. Some of you might recognize Neil Rackham as the author of Spin Selling, which is a very popular book out there in the kind of the sales world, probably published 20, 30 years ago at this point. He wrote another book called Major Account Sales Strategy. And in that book, he detailed the difference between a continuation and an advance. A continuation is when you follow up with a prospect and they say, hey, I'm not ready to book a meeting, or I'm not ready to make a decision, check back with me in 2 weeks. That's a continuation. You haven't made any progress in the sale. Versus an advance, which is maybe getting some kind of commitment. Saying, okay, I commit to, in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to send you a sample file, or I'm going to have you talk with Bob over on IT in the meantime so that he can answer some of your you can answer some of his technical questions. That's an actual advance because you're making progress towards a sale. And the idea of no wasted miles is in your sales call going in. Like, are you ready? Are you prepared for that call to make sure that you're getting an advance, not just a continuation? Otherwise, you've, in a sense, wasted that call. You haven't made any progress, right? It's the same idea with this concept of just check it in. I did a sort of a rant on this about a month ago. This idea of like, can we just remove this idea of checking in on a prospect, because just checking in doesn't add any value. That's a wasted effort by you. It's a wasted communication. It's wasted from the prospect standpoint because you haven't added any value, and it's wasted for you because you've kind of burned, a bullet in your holster, if you will. You've used some of that dry powder that you had, and instead of using that dry powder, instead of using that communication to move things forward, or at least adding value in some way, it's just like, hey, checking in, which is actually annoying to a prospect as opposed to valuable. Going into every meeting knowing what the outcome is. Like, too often I see teams that go into a meeting without a really clear view of the outcome. Like, have you done a huddle with your team, even if that team is you and your co-founder, or you and your salesperson, or you and your product person going into the meeting and say, okay, going into this meeting, we're meeting with these people. This is where we were in the last couple meetings. This is where we are now. This is where we want to go. And sitting down and saying, like, an ideal outcome for the meeting is this, which is getting a POC approved. If we can't get the ideal outcome, then the secondary outcome would be at least getting a meeting with Bob over in IT so we can talk through some of the technical integrations and some of the other technical questions that Bob and the team probably have. And if we can't get to that second best outcome, what's the third best outcome? Well, maybe the third best outcome is we schedule a second demo with some of the people that we're missing from this meeting, so at least we have an opportunity to talk to everybody that's going to be involved with this decision. Right? Again, it's like no wasted miles. Every meeting has a purpose. Every meeting should have an outcome, and that's up to you. It's the responsibility and accountability that you should have to yourself to make sure you're making most out of that interaction. So, we had recently we had Todd Caponi. Some of you might recognize his name. He wrote a best-selling book called The Transparency Sale. Todd's been a great friend, and a friend not just to me in the professional world, but also a friend to our coaching program at Startup Selling. We've had him come and do multiple presentations, multiple trainings. And something he said recently is that as you're going and focusing on a target market, like do that even if it's for 6 weeks. Like you've got to have a focus on a target market. Because if you don't have that focus, then a lot of that sales effort is going to be wasted. It's going to be exhausted. He had this quote which he says, look, like every time you're out there selling, there's no science projects. We're not just doing things for fun. We're not doing things just to experiment. There needs to be an outcome for that. It's like, yeah, you need to run a sales experiment maybe around a certain target market to figure out where you need to focus, or you need to run some experiments around your messaging or the people that you're talking to. But you're not doing it just to do it. There needs to be an outcome involved. And so I really love that quote of no science project. So this idea of no wasted miles is just really taking personal responsibility in every sales call, in every sales interaction, every sales opportunity, and figuring out exactly what do we need to do in order to get the most out of that interaction, to get the most out of that opportunity. And further, more broadly, what are we doing to make sure that we have a focus on making sure we're selling, not just like marketing and branding, because those outcomes, the marketing that you're doing, could certainly be a lot of wasted miles. And so that's the first lesson for today. So the second one I wanted to share is every detail. Cover every detail. So what does that mean? What does that mean for training? What does that mean for preparing for a race? So right now, a couple days before the race begins, I'm doing a lot of final preparation. I'm putting together aid bags that they have at certain stations where you can get stuff you might need from an aid bag. I've worked on a manual for my crew, which is mostly my wife and my son, as well as 2 friends of mine that are going to be pacing me at certain parts of the races. And in that pacer crew manual, it's a 14-page document. I think the first 8 pages are explaining to my pacers like how to pace me, what to expect. These are my time goals. These are the checkpoints along the way that we want to hit in certain times. What to do in case of a medical situation, like letting them know my medical history, just in case something were to happen while I'm out there. So this is going through the entire, basically the whole, like visualizing how this is going to go. And I see my friend Dan at mile 62 in Forest Hill, and I'm like, hey, when I'm coming into the aid station, you guys should be able to track me from the last aid station, which is about a mile or is about an hour and a half away. So you should have a pretty good idea of when I'm going to be coming in. So when I come into the Forest Hill aid station, here's what I'd like. You're going to have this red bag, and inside the red bag, there's this mix of Tailwind, and there's going to be an empty cup that I want you to fill with water and have that ready for me so I can do a quick chug to make sure I'm staying hydrated. There's going to be a bag of plantain chips. I need to grab those. I'm going to want to change my shirt. There's a red shirt in there. Like being super specific, not just showing up and them saying, hey, what do you need? Because that way I don't have to make a decision, which is something I talked about in the last installment, this idea of automating your decisions, just making everything preordained, predetermined. So I don't want to be coming into an aid station at 7, 8 o'clock at night after running 62 miles and have to make any decisions. I just want to show up. They're going to have the bag ready. Everything's open. Hand me stuff. Take my trash from my bag, fill up my bottles, and then let's keep moving down the trail. All of that stuff is in the Pacer manual. In fact, I'll include a copy of it to the link just so you can see what I mean by cover every detail. That also means like when I'm going through the race and thinking about every checkpoint, every aid station along the way, what's the distance, what's the terrain, how long did it take me to cover that terrain in training as I was working through, I've run 93 of the 100 miles on this course already, just in training this time. I've done almost the whole course from end to end. There's only 2 miles of the course I haven't done. And it's just one long hill, so I already know what to expect there. What I've done is I've calculated calories. I know exactly how many calories I need to consume per hour. I know how I'm going to consume that calories, how those calories are going to be consumed. It's like a certain amount of liquid mixed in with some powder I use called Tailwind. I've got some plantain chips that I mentioned, maybe a goo gel from time to time, maybe some watermelon at an aid station, and making sure I eat enough, but also not making sure I don't eat too much, like covering every detail so I don't get any gastrointestinal issues. How much water I have to drink, and then how much sodium do I have to take to balance out the water? Because if you drink too much water without enough sodium, That's really bad for your body. And the same thing if you have too much salt without enough water, that's also really bad for your body. So I've mapped out station to station how many calories am I going to be consuming and where those calories are going to come from, how to change out my water bottles, timing myself from station to station. We did a 50-mile run about 4 weeks ago, from mile 30 of the course down to mile roughly 78 of the course, so 48 miles. And they had aid stations. This is organized by the race organizers, just to help people see a lot of the course and get acclimated to what they're going to see out there. And they had aid stations, so I was timing myself through those aid stations as if it was a race. Okay, I'm coming in, I can see the tent. It's a couple hundred yards away. Let me start getting my bottles unscrewed and out of my backpack, so then I'm not wasting time there. I have packets of Tailwind in my side pouch. Okay, let me get my side pouch unzipped and get that packet out. What am I going to say to the people that are working the aid stations? Like, okay, I just need some water, and dump this packet in. Like, I'm rehearsing every single detail, like getting specific in the training. My coach told me, the last couple weeks in training, for 2 weeks, midweek, I drove up to Olympic Village just to do some work, some hill work in the elevation, as well as the first 3 miles of the race, because it's a long climb. It's about 2,500 feet of climbing in the first 3.5 miles. And I said, hey, is that a good idea? And he said, specificity always helps, like getting as specific as possible in your training. Doing heat training. It's been really hot out here in Sacramento Valley the last couple of days, last week or so. So I'm looking at the weather and going, wow, this is great. It's going to be in the 90s. It's going to be 100 degrees today. I can go do a run midday. And I was doing that with tights on and a long sleeve shirt, because I wanted to get used to the heat. It's going to be 100 degrees is the forecast that day of the race. So again, like covering every detail. I'm looking to take out the variables, right? I don't want to just like figure stuff out along the way. I want to know exactly what to do. I've gone so far, and this is going to really sound weird, I've gone so far as to practice not peeing. I practice not peeing. So what I mean by that is, like, if you think about, if you have to stop to relieve yourself, right? It's like a minute and a half, right? You got to pull over, do your business, and then move on. Well, if you can hold it for a little longer, imagine in the road trip with your parents when you're a kid, you're like, I gotta go, and they're like, oh, you gotta hold it. There's a certain value to being able to hold it, right? Because that means you're doing fewer stops along the way, right? Every minute is going to count. So, like, literally, when I talk about covering every detail, I will literally in training practice holding it in, however painful it might be, just to, if I can do 5 less pit stops, that's 5 minutes. That's, could be the difference between hitting my sub 24-hour time that I want to hit or not, right? If I come in at 24 hours and 3 minutes, and I think to myself, geez, if I could have maybe stopped a couple fewer times, maybe I would have made it. So this is the level of detail when I say cover every detail. This is what I go to in this final preparation. And so what does that mean for sales? What does that mean for startups and sales? It means you can't skip steps in your sales process, right? You've got to think about, what is my selling process and what is the buyer's buying process? Like, if I just let the buyer lead the buying process, then is that going to get us to the finish line of the sale or the conversion of the sale? Probably not. You have to remember that most of your buyers have never bought a product like yours before. If you're a startup, they don't know how to buy your thing. They don't know how to buy your stuff, your platform, your software, because they probably never bought it before. It's not like office furniture. It's not like laptop computers where they have probably a checklist through procurement. It's like, hey, we have a new employee or hired 10 new people this week. We got to get 10 new laptops. It's like a checklist. It's easy to procure. They go get those laptops from Apple or Dell or whoever, right? When it comes to buying your software, when it comes to buying your platform, they don't have a checklist because you're probably replacing manual process or people, right? Spreadsheets or SharePoint. And so you've got to remember, you got to think about every detail about their buying process, because chances are they're going to skip steps because they don't know what to do next. So it's your responsibility to look at your selling process and make sure that you're saying, hey, like, I can't skip doing the qualification call the right way because I know everybody wants to see the cool new thing. Just because somebody wants to see a demo, I have to know that doesn't mean they're interested in buying. So that means I have to qualify that lead, right? I need to do customer discovery. before, okay, I've qualified the lead, we set up the demo. It's the difference between qualifying the lead and discovering the real priorities, the real problems, the real pain, so that in the demo you can make sure you're mapping your product to their problem, not just doing a harbor tour, as my friend Peter Cohen says, right? So these are examples of like covering every detail. It's some of what I just said a little bit earlier. Going into a meeting, are you preparing and saying, okay, what are the key outcomes that we want to get to? What's the ideal next step, the second ideal step, the third ideal step, if we have to have some fallback plans? What are going to be the next 3 steps that I'm going to propose to the prospect, right? How do you present your pricing? Like before you going in, you're going to review a proposal, you're going to review a contract with a prospect. Are you sitting down and like practicing that? Not just saying, oh, well, or objections, right? And they say, well, like if they ask about the price, I'll just tell them that, the price is this. Like, no, what specifically are you going to say? Have you written it down and see how it sounds and tested it out on people that have never listened to you present your pricing before, so they can hear if it sounds, do you sound nervous, right? Does it sound like it doesn't quite add up, or does it make sense? Maybe you want to charge an implementation fee, but the way it's coming out doesn't make sense. And the prospect is like, well, why would I pay an implementation fee if I'm buying the software? If you don't have an answer to that, if you haven't presented that the right way, then you haven't covered every detail, right? And I've also seen this with objection handling, where I'll ask a client and say, hey, well, what do you do? What are you going to do in this call if they ask you about integrations? They say, oh, I'll just tell them about the APIs. Okay. What specifically are you going to say? Well, I'll tell them we have some API documentation. I can send it over to them. Okay. Maybe that's okay. But like, what specifically are you going to explain to them? Do they even really know what API documentation is? Because again, remember, chances are they've never bought your stuff like yours before, right? Or if they ask about support and customer success, oh, we'll just talk about our customer support. That's not enough to just say, I will tell them about this, or I'll tell them about that, or we'll just share how we do this. Like, you got to write this stuff down and practice it. You got to cover every detail. And when you cover every detail, that also means covering it with your prospect. Covering every detail of the proposal before you send it. Hey, you asked for the proposal, happy to send it. I've drafted it up. I've got most of it done. I got a few quick questions. Let's review it first. Cover every detail just so that I know that you and I are on the same page, and then I'll be happy to make some adjustments and send it over. That's what I mean. Like, when I talk about like I practice not peeing, you got to practice doing like what you're going to say when you get those objections. And what are you going to do when they still object after you explain the situation? Like, you got to cover every detail. You got to be specific. You've got to get as real into the sale in your practice and in your preparation as if you were doing the sale. One of the things I used to do with my sales reps when I was managing at Altos Research is, before, especially like bigger calls we were doing with we used to sell to financial market, a trading desk like Morgan Stanley and TCW and Goldman Sachs. Those are all customers of ours. So we're selling, 100K plus data deals. And one of the things we used to do before big meetings, we'd sit in the conference room at the whiteboard, and we'd get a marker, and we would map out the call. Okay, if this, then that. And just do a big grid of, okay, if they do this, what are we going to do? Because if we want to get to this outcome over here at the end of the meeting, and they want to take a right turn, how are we going to get them back? Where are we going to get the left turn to go back to where we want to go? We can't just wing it here. We can't just tell them this or hope for that. Right? You got to cover every detail. So those are my 2 lessons from the trail for today. Is number 1, no wasted miles. Number 2, cover every detail. I feel like I've done that for sure for the last 6 months, and especially over the last couple of days as I'm getting final prep ready. So with my 14-page runner manual, crew manual, and counting every calorie to make sure I don't eat too little, too much. So that's it. So again, like, look, if you're going through your own ultramarathon with your journey, you're going from idea to impact. It's a long journey, and it's a struggle. You're trying to move up, right? You're trying to go from a basic idea with no customer, no revenue, up to a place where you're making true impact in your market for your customers. And that's going to feel like an ultramarathon. It's going to take you 10 years to get there. There's a famous Bill Gates quote, right? Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but underestimate what they can do in 10. Like, that 10 years, like, that's your 10-year ultramarathon, to go from idea to impact. So if you want some help with some of what I shared here, or just generally getting a look at your sales process to figure out what you've got to do to ramp it up, to scale it up, to get more repeatability, to get more scalability, then like I said earlier, there's a pretty good chance that a team and I here at Sales Quality can help. So if you want to get some help, or you just want to have a quick chat to understand more about your situation, share a few details, work on a few ideas, and then figure out if or how we can help you, happy to do it. So again, send me an email, Scott@salesqualia, QUALIA.com, Scott@salesqualia.com. You just use the subject word private or opportunity, just something to let me know if you want to have a quick chat. And Jocelyn will make sure that we get some time on the calendar. And otherwise, you're welcome to shoot me a DM if you're watching this on LinkedIn, or just comment down below with the word opportunity, and make sure to get in touch. So, all right, so we're right at 30 minutes. I think that's a good place to stop. Might do one more before race day, but I'm getting pretty close. I'm not sure if I'll have a chance to do it. If not, we'll pick up after. And hopefully, if I don't do one before race time, then the next time that I do one of these, I hope that I can tell you that I finished with a time of 23:59:59 or better, sub 24. That's the goal. All right, that's it for now. This is Scott Sambucci signing off.